Hey there, it's Eugene here. So this will be the second part of the skill-based gamification series, if you want to call it that. Basically, it's going to read through these and give a brief explanation. This should give the overview of what it was, pretty much, the basic concept for it. So let's see here. So the whole idea of skill-based gamification, like I said in the previous video, which turned out to be a lot longer than I wanted, is that the gamification community has its foundation on the concept that you're going to get secrets from video games mainly, or they might say board games, etc. But the main focus, and they make this explicit, is video games, and they believe there has been the secrets of design in these video games to create addiction and dopamine triggers and what have you. And through gamification, they're taking these secrets and applying it into non-game concepts, meaning that they're going to make an employee addicted to work, a student addicted to studying for school, or say a customer addicted for interacting with your product, marketing campaign, what have you. The basic notion of this is a fallacy, right? So there's two types of games. There's the skill-based games in the real world, which these are chess and sports, for example. And there are the virtual games, which are called time-based games. And what I mean by time-based games is that time-based games is that the games are deliberately designed to be able to be won or achieved or move on to the progress based on a time frame. So you don't have to have a lot of skill sets in order to improve in your game in order to win the game. So practically how it works is that if you have an RPG game, for example, you're a goblin slayer. You start out, you're a weak character, level 1 or what have you, and you go kill some low level goblins, which at first are hard, but then you level up. You get a magic sword, an armor, what have you. It becomes easy now to kill those goblins, and you get these dopamine triggers because, oh, well, what's difficult is now easy. So it creates the illusion of mastery, of progress. The power is being increased. But it's all artificial, right? So before that becomes too easy, the game then introduces a harder goblin to kill. Pretty much just increase the HP of the goblin, the hit points, the armor, what have you. And now you got to kill that more difficult goblin, go through this process again and again, and that kind of triggers dopamine triggers, right? So it's these artificial power-ups, which is a term I coined, that is creating these dopamine triggers, like the false sense of empowerment. It's all a work of fiction. In the real world, with skill-based games and games in general, you cannot have these artificial power-ups. In order to improve in a skill-based game, you have to increase your skill sets. And this is the application or the added pressure that you need to go through, either physically, mentally, or both, in order to increase these skills, right? So think about the process it takes for a chess player to increase and become a grandmaster. It's a lot of hours of deep practice, looking at games, playing games, studying books, etc., right? It's not necessarily fun. You're not giggling and having a great time, right? Or the other aspect of it is sports. What does it take to become a top performer in athleticism, right? In any sports. These are adults a lot of times that are playing literal games for their work, right? So it's not these dopamine trigger happy environment. You have to do this repetitive work that is painful, boring, repetitive, in order to be able to increase your skill sets and become a top player, a top athlete. And these can take years, right, of deep commitment, sometimes giving up, say, social encounters, maybe food, long binges of Netflix, whatever you, right? So there's a lot of sacrifices in order to become a top performer. And this is not what video games are or what the gamification community promises. They cannot even gamify creating a pleasure revolution, etc., that they're promising outside the video game world into adults literally playing games for a living. So what makes you believe they can do it anywhere else? So that's the basic gist of it, right? And they get these very, very false notions of what a game is, right? So if we have this concept about the artificial power-ups, you cannot apply these into the real world. Say, for example, a sales rep, which is an example I gave in the previous video too. A door-to-door sales rep, right? You cannot give this sales rep a magic hat that's going to increase his persuasion skills, say 20%, so he'll be able to knock doors and convince people at a 20% higher rate than before, right? You cannot give him a magic smile, you cannot edit the weather, you cannot edit the difficulty of the customers, right? You cannot artificially level him up and have him be a better closer or what have you. They have to go through a process very similar to skill-based games, which is what sales reps naturally already gravitate to. Have you ever been a sales rep, gone to conferences? They do have the metaphors of sales being a lot like sports for a reason. It makes sense. There's a whole learning process. And this is the deliberate practice, which I've mentioned in other times, where you have to go through a deliberate attempt to increase your skills. This is going to be very repetitive. It's going to be very painful until that's really hard, either mentally, physically. You have to get immediate feedback of something you're doing wrong and immediately correct it, right? So this is the basketball player dribbling the ball again and again and again for hours and years. Not playing, having fun, doing that same repetitive task again and again and again, or shooting the three-pointer. It's kind of like that horrible 1980s movie, Karate Kid, right? I hated that movie so much as a kid, where he has to clean the cars and do all these chores, and then he kind of has these fighting skills that become second nature. So Karate Kid kind of exaggerates it, but it's kind of like that concept, what you're doing there. It's not this fun entertainment. So anyways, that's the difference, right? Skill-based gamification is the focus on real-world games and skill-based games, which should have been the focus on gamification, but them being a bunch of half-wits for the most part, that cannot even grasp the basic of deductive, inductive, and abductive logic. I actually told him what's the process, what's the premise and conclusion of this, like how does that make sense? They don't even know the basics of logic, but they're going around coming up with these revolutionary quote-unquote methods that are going to change the world and make everyone happy, and be the greatest management skills ever. But anyways, so this is basically the skill-based gamification maxims. Is pretty much a bunch of bulletin points I created. This is the book I created in 2016. And in about 20 days, I went back and saw the logs of it while I was in Mexico on a coffee shop in the mornings with nothing to do. So pretty much I'm going to read over this and see how much I can remember from when I originally wrote this. Like I said, it's been a few years. And kind of explain the basic concept. What I believe gamification should have been. Instead of the nonsense they promote. So let's see, blah blah blah. This section here are bullet points. So 1, we don't have godlike powers to change reality the way computer programmers change the virtual reality. I don't care about the reality that's broken since it's irrelevant. So that kind of goes back to the example of the sales rep, right? So the whole thing that triggers the dopamine triggers in the video games is artificial. It's this artificial world creating an artificial sense of power, right? Something increases and now you are more powerful in relationship to the rest of the virtual world. You don't have this in the real world, right? What they do in the gamification community a lot of times, they give these BS, really condescending, especially if you're in the business community, like giving this to your employees, like level up badges and stuff. So this is like crap you would see in a video game. But the problem with the video game is that when you level up, a lot of times this is literally associated with some real benefits in the game, right? You are more powerful based on the context of the rest of your virtual world. These sort of badges are BS, dude. They are literally the equivalent of giving a gold star to some kindergartner, put it on his forehead. Good job, Tommy. You made your little macaroni paper, whatever Americans do for the kids. Well, you color within the line, something like that. So, and the whole concept of reality is broken. It's a book that came out, and the main concept is that they're going to take secrets from the video game world and apply it to reality. Now it's going to be fun. And the whole point of video games is that from the bottom up, they created this whole environment which is aimed for happiness, but the real world is not aimed for happiness, and therefore they're going to redo the reality, and pretty much is blind as game concepts, and there's different conception, guys, because you have the original author, and she wrote it like what, 2011, 2009, I don't know. It's quite an old book. It's about 10-year-old book. So pretty much the ideas behind it probably different. But the basic concept that they have in that book, and gamification in general, the games are aimed for happiness. I do not subscribe to that. I don't think I wrote it here, for example. But the basic idea, what I consider, is why video games are so addicting. You had the power-ups, but I believe it might have something to do too with evolutionary. It's not pressure, but impulses that we have. So it's kind of like when you have, for example, a dog or a rabbit, or a cat, and well, let's just focus on a dog or a fox, right, or rabbit, which they have this evolutionary necessity or instinct to dig, right? They need to dig something. And maybe the cats when he goes potty. They have this instinct that they need to use their claws, their paws, and dig some dirt. And if they're in-house all the time, they start scratching up furniture and so on, trying to release this instinct. I believe like a lot of the video game fascination for it is because in the modern world, we are not able to apply a lot of these natural impulses we have. For example, there's this term of temporal spatial reasoning. So temporal meaning time, spatial meaning space, reasoning. So what this might be, for example, if you have a rock and you're trying to aim at a moving target, or a spear, or something like that. Like humans did evolve their hand-eye coordination to throw things. If you look at evolutionary textbook, like we are specially designed to do this. There's these brain centers for temporal spatial coordination. But most people in the real world, in the modern world, are not doing this. Maybe you're playing some sports, which I believe that sports comes to it, right? In front, you're literally kicking and moving around. You're doing this, but probably once you're an adult, even like a lot of teenagers now these days, they don't even play them in sports. So maybe the video games are this sort of context where you can apply temporal spatial reasoning, which you do quite a lot. Another thing might be a friendly way to promote like aggressiveness, right? So people were kind of or evolved to work in groups, and wizard groups compete with other groups. Maybe generally in the modern world, you don't get to do this, right? You don't get to go and raid the neighboring village, or go hunting, or So what they do instead is they have this little group of friends, which they go compete against other people, say some first-person shooter or something like that, and they go quote unquote to war. And that might be a instinct humans have. Again, this goes back to primate chimpanzees working these platoons, so on, which is being satisfied through the gaming. So this whole concept that comes from happiness, I don't think it comes from happiness. I think it's more about satisfying instinctual necessities, similar to a dog needing to dig for dirt, that we humans have, which are being suppressed in the modern world. Like I said, this temporal spatial hand-eye coordination, A lot of it's social. If you see a lot of studies on what are the motivation for, like, for example, teenagers for playing games, a lot of the game addicts see themselves, their identity, like their intelligence, for example, it's associated in their performance of the game, and especially teenagers that are really into games, online gaming, their status within their group of friends, if their group of friends are into it, it's not every group of teenagers are into this, but the status within that group of friends that are into it will be based on your performance on the games in a similar way. For example, with teenagers that are into sports, like the top quarterback, oh, he's the top quarterback. And American movies like to do a lot of parodies of this. And their performance in football is a direct correlation to their status within that group, right? And again, this has like caveman status. So that's kind of like I went in another direction, but that's basically where it comes like, right? We cannot edit the real world the way a programmer edits the virtual world, which is where a lot of these artificial power-ups come and has the dopamine triggers. Therefore, or these concept of applying game concepts into the real world are irrelevant, right? So remember these BS badges, stuff like that, the point system, which are irrelevant, right? If you're in a video game, you might have a point system, but a point system is usually related to your character's ability, right? You get a new gun, right? Or something. You level up. So if you just get points for the sake of points, it's meaningless, right? But they're trying to put a patch. So it's kind of like the American term, which I like a lot, putting lipstick on a pig. So it's kind of like, no, they're just putting some paint over it and say, oh, cool. Now we have an improvement. It's kind of like getting like a regular car and putting like some artificial aerodynamic, like tailgates or something like that. You know, it might look like a jet or a race car, but it's not. You know, the core mechanic for it it's not there. So okay, it's gonna go to the next one. The real world just doesn't offer easily carefully designed pleasures and intelligent designs. So it says, all right, let's read the whole thing clearly. So it says, the real world just doesn't offer up as easily carefully designed pleasures, the thrilling challenges, and the powerful social bondings offered in virtual environments. First of all, social bondings are better in the real world than in virtual environments. That's just creepy as hell. Reality doesn't motivate us effectively. Reality isn't engineered to maximize our potential. Reality isn't designed from the bottom up to make us happy. Okay, so that's the happiness quote. I remember her saying that before. So Jane McGonigal, reality is broken. The quote is irrelevant. Reality is what we have. We can't change the computer programming techniques the same way we can't change it for TV lovers, comic book lovers, or understanding storytelling. So a lot of it's kind of like a repeat from the first one, but I did put the last part there. So one of the concepts I talk in the book below is that the whole idea that you're going to take concept from the video games applied to the real world is so ridiculous that it's very similar to the concept of we're going to apply the science for creating television, comic books, or novels into the real world. So what I mean by that is that a movie, for example, has a very carefully created plot line, sometimes by several writers, right? Where they pretty much just work to make some story interesting. They can break the laws of reality. Like I said, most stories are very incoherent in terms of their timeline, logistics, finding like if you have the foundation of the world they're talking about, it tends to not make a lot of sense, and they kind of just roll it there, right? So they don't make some complex model which I believe actually would be a pretty good idea, where they consider the logistics, the time, how long it takes to travel from here and there. They're not doing this. So the basic concept is that the godlike powers to create a movie or a comic book or a novel, what makes that novel interesting, you cannot apply it into the real world. For example, you cannot start saying, well, if this person were to say this in this situation, that person's reaction would have been this, and that would made a good story. Like that you don't have that godlike power into a real world, right? So this is not to say, for example, if you're doing a speech, you might be, for example, get some storytelling techniques into your speech or into everyday conversation, right? That's not what I mean by that, right? So that would actually be, it's a pretty good idea to do that. Taking acting classes, for example, like how to move your body language. That does make sense, but you don't have the power to start controlling everything and make your office, for example, say you like the TV show The Office. Well, I want them to act this way, so you can't control that, right? So the whole idea that you are going to get techniques for creating narratives, like these fictional worlds, and apply to the real world, doesn't make any sense. So I'm kind of rambling over myself. Let's go to the other one. The dopamine triggers from video games are generated through artificial power-ups. That is, the illusion of power created in an artificial virtual world. In the real world, we rely on the degree of the winner effect and certain mental traits. Sports psychology teaches us to utilize these. Video game design theories, therefore, for the most part, irrelevant. So what the winner effect and loser effect, which is the opposite of the winner effect, is, it's a concept I've seen in biology for a while, before I started reading some books exclusively on it. So there's this, I can't remember the guy's name. He wrote the book African Genesis and the Territorial Imperative, and he has some other books like the Hunting Hypothesis. So pretty much the guy writes, and somewhere between the 1950s and 60s, I believe, these books came out. Guy, that's it's a great job of writing. Actually, I used to enjoy reading the books just by the way he writes. It's been a few years though. So he talks specifically on the Territorial Imperative, his second book, about this notion of the winner effect. So he doesn't name it explicitly, but he goes on saying, for example, that animals that win tend to win more often, and they tend to win on their home. So they have a home field advantage, which is something sports have too. If you read the book, The Secret Life of Sports, it's pretty much confirmation of the winner effect. So basically what the winner effect is, and there's other books, for example, some guy called Ian, Robertson has a book called the Winner Effect. There's a book called Top Dog. There's the book called The Hour Between Dog and Wolf, which pretty much covers the financial markets, pretty much Wall Street, through an understanding of the winner effect being applied in the corporate world, in Wall Street, and the financial market, and how that affects the financial markets, the employees, etc. Really fascinating book. So pretty much what it is that animals from fishes all the way to humans, if they win a competition against mainly someone from the same species, mainly males, so if they win a competition, their brain gets flooded by dopamine and testosterone, and the reward centers of their brains get dopamine and testosterone receptors. So they get triggered. So pretty much what this does is alters the behavior of that individual. So for example, if they have two rats that are put in one of each end, and they tell the rat to go. Once they meet each other in the middle, they're going to start pushing each other, right? So one rat's going to push the other rat. And they found out that if they had put and they kind of weighed the rats, right? So if they found out if they had a big rat with a small rat, and that bigger rat wins, and they put another rat at the same size or bigger than the rat who is won, that rat is more likely to push the other rat to the other side of the end. So who is more aggressive, who's more dominant. And there's 4 examples of this. For example, was Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson, when he got out of prison, supposedly they set him up with some easy fights where he gains confidence, and it's been this sort of understanding. And sorry, I got interrupted there. So pretty much the idea of Mike Tyson, if they get some easy fights, they're going to improve their confidence and win further fights. So this has been an understanding in general sports for a long time. So basically the winner effect is that if the male wins, the brain changes, and pretty much there seems to be this evolutionary context where the brain can tell that, hey, you are in a position to be able to take advantage of your intelligence or your strengths, right? And get more resources. And therefore they start acting like the quote unquote alpha male. And actually, if you look at like a lot of monkeys and like gorillas, if that monkey or gorilla becomes the alpha male of their group, their brain gets bombarded by testosterone and their behavior just changes. And for example, the silverback gorilla, that is a sign that the changes for him to be the top dog, which happened in his brain, that's a visual manifestation for everyone else that has happened, and that's entirely based on the social context. And apparently they don't like studies. For example, if the animals fight and there's other animals like looking at them, the animal that won has a greater winner effect, and the animal lost has a greater loser effect. So the status is confirmed by all the other animals, and somehow they can tell that they know that their status have changed, and their brains activate accordingly. So this is very fascinating stuff. It's based on some concept called epigenetics, and you should really study it into that if you haven't. It's fascinating. So pretty much what epigenetics is that if changes, so it changes on the DNA, but it's not the DNA code per se. So you have your DNA, which is fixed, but there are certain triggers that activates or deactivates certain genes. And these triggers, pretty much is like a switch, on or off, can be affected throughout your life and based on diets, etc. So you have your fixed DNA, but not all your DNA is active at any given moment. They trigger on or off. And this is one of the things that happens with the animal kingdom, which can be triggered through the social relationships. And with humans specifically, now going away from animals to humans, is very contextual. For example, if a male is with a good friend and the wife or girlfriend from that male comes in from his good friend, his testosterone plunges. Right, and they believe this is an artificial way to prevent backstabbing. If a male backstabs a friend, which they done these studies with video games, for example, they have a group of close friends playing against each other, say a first-person shooter, everyone against everyone. The person who won against his friends gets a loser effect. His testosterone drops. He gets punished. But if he plays against strangers and he wins, he gets a winner effect. And if he's playing with his friends as a team against other groups and they win, they all get a winner effect. And depending on the performance of each person or their perceived performance, they get different winner effects. For example, if someone believes that they would have not won because of him and he's the all-star, he gets a bigger winner effect than everyone else. If they lose, and depending on what the attribute that lost, was it because they are objectively worse, or is it because they didn't try hard enough or the other guy cheated, right? That will determine. If they believe they're objectively worse, they get a loser effect. But if they believe because they didn't work hard enough or they cheated, they get angry, and that anger creates a winner effect even if they lost. And that's kind of related to the Carol Dweck, probably mispronounced her name, ideas of fixed mindset and growth mindset. So fixed mindset, for example, is that you have fixed intelligence and you can improve on it. Growth mindset is that your intelligence is malleable and you can improve on it. And that supposedly causes different ways of viewing the world. And if you look at the what she's describing, she's kind of describing the win or loser effect. So the type of mindset you have based on the Carol Dweck framework does seem to affect the winner loser effect. So it's very, very subjective. For example, another example was relationships. If people were in a toxic relationship, they seem to have a loser effect. But if they were to break up and it was people treated them right, they had a winner effect. And this isn't another book, that winner effect, but that Ian, I think he's British guy. And it actually affects your intelligence too. I remember there's one study done. If you have an abusive boss, and that's maybe like raising his voice or insulting you, so for example, that person is going to perform worse in intelligence tests. And there seems to be this sort of relationship between intelligence and your status. So one of the studies I remember reading is, for example, they did some intelligence to some people that were about to get promoted, but they didn't know they were going to get promoted. So they do some basic intelligence tests. Okay, that's your score. After they got promoted, they did another intelligence test, so the people were pretty happy about it. Their score improved after they were promoted. And that's one of the things coming in the book, the winner effect, that the winner effect does improve intelligence. And you can probably tell that too if I don't know, I'm not talking about myself, but if you're a guy, if you start getting a lot of success and you move up in status, your brain seems to work better. It's really odd, which is being confirmed by the studies from these winner effects. And so pretty much what I'm saying here, sports psychology. So you should be studying sports psychology instead of video game design. So sports psychology, what's the basic gist of it, right? You have to be tough. You have to work hard. It's going to be painful, but this is the process you got to go through in order to become competitive and improve your skill sets, right? So that whole framework sports psychology has created for sports should have been what was being promoted by gamification. But again, they're going back to their whole happiness, pleasure, reality is broken concepts, which are BS, right? So they're not really going to abandon that and move on to sports psychology, probably. And probably, honestly, I didn't even believe they have the IQ to figure it out and make something that actually works. But yeah, it should have been sports psychology and my ramblings about that. So we're going on to the next one. Don't rely on gamification experts. This applies for both consultants and employees. I've managed call centers and have hired programmers to create gamification softwares. I've all talked to programmers. They don't have any experience in the sales, but they read the garbage from consultants. Guess what happens? My employees didn't get tricked into believing they were in a game. They hated the software. Work is still work. All right, so I didn't quite hire it myself. Like, I'm not the boss paying the paycheck, but I did have like a programmer that was kind of like relying on me, or not on me per se, but the sales team on what the hell they're going to do to make the gamification game. And dude, the guys, well, they did this sort of software for training, mainly, and they were trying to apply this crap outside gamification. So this is kind of like before I started my writings, etc. So I kind of got my first experience of what the hell these guys are doing. So pretty much the either the experts or the programmers, they don't have any real experience of what's going on in the call center. And even if it's sales, for example, it's very different from one company to another, or even one team from another, right? What's the social dynamic? I remember working for one sales company where we did order sales, and I was with one team, and that team was very professional, quote unquote. Like they were from Utah, so they didn't drink alcohol. Like they were like these Mormons who had done missionary work where they go knock doors for 2 years, and now they're picking up this current job where they're knocking doors and doing sales. So they didn't drink, they didn't stay up late. They were reading books, and the sort of meetings, because we had like an hour meeting before we went out to knock doors, we pretty much talked about the books we read, what we learned from the book, the concept, etc. So it was getting kind of like professional in that sense, right? If you get what I'm saying. Then I did go to another team, which was also people from Utah, but he didn't have a lot of Mormons or LDS, like they prefer to be called, literally saints. So the people were drinking in that group, and there were vulgar, man. They were cussing, was the first group never did, joking, having a good time, etc. Right? So these were two very different groups, even though they're the same company, and they're probably like they're literally in the same neighborhood area. Very different. So you have completely different dynamics, and the management styles in order to get these people going was very different. As a result from it. So the team that was kind of vulgar, they kind of relied on telling funny, vulgar joke stories of what they've been doing. And that kind of gave you lessons just by joking around. The other one was more, yeah, we talk about our stuff, but we're professional, we're reading books, etc. And yeah, I mean, they both performed pretty well. So the vulgar one, apparently it seemed to be overall selling a little bit more. But they have a bigger team, so I'm not sure what the average was. But in any case, you need to have specific expertise of what you're doing. It's going to change from place to place. So the gamification guru, like imagine if you have a gamification guru, like you are hiring someone, and some guy walks up and he's trying to apply for your position for a BP of sales, and he tells you have no sales experience, little to none. But I've been reading pop psychology books and playing video games and have discovered the secrets of engagement. So even though I have no sales experience, I believe I should be the one in charge of your whole sales division, right? You wouldn't hire this guy. You want someone who has been there, done that. And this is the problem with a lot of the gamification gurus, the gamification experts. They try to have their quote-unquote techniques being applied under every topic under the sun. It doesn't matter what the hell the problem is. They want to have those cookie-cutter solutions that apply for everything. It might be sales, customer service, healthcare, finance, education, right? Any topic under the sun. I'm probably missing some stuff, honestly. So, and you need to have that expertise of that specific niche, or you don't know what the hell you're talking about. So pretty much these people, what they do, they create the illusion that their bullshit will be applied into everything, all right, by calling it gamification, but they have no experience of what the hell they're talking about, which is very dangerous. And the other problem with the programmers is that they read the gamification stuff and they kind of like try to make this little video game, and it's bullshit. They don't. The management hates it. The employees hate it. So what should really happen if you're a manager, you know your team better, you should be able to figure out what would make it work. Like, what do these people, which you manage, like? What are the personalities, right? Some people might like some really goofy game-like stuff, and others, well, might be more professional, etc., right? You know what they like. You run some tests, figure it out. So let's move on. Don't tell your employees that they'll have fun working. Let them know it's going to be one of the hardest things they've ever done. Again, this is the context of sales, but it will be worth due to the experience, right? So a lot of younger people work because of the experience, money, or both. Read sports psychologies for inspiration, how to do this. So this is one of the problems gamification do, that they have this whole concept where they are... Sorry, I had to pause that again. So the basic concept of gamification gurus is that they're going to make the work fun. That's the basic gist of it, right? So it's no longer going to be work. They actually say this explicitly in some of their TED Talks. It's going to be a game or fun. And by it's not going to be work, it's just going to be enjoyable. this is complete bullshit. You cannot hide, for example, if you have a call center, right? You're not going to hide the fact that the guy in the call center is answering phones, the persons on the other side are being rude, are insulting him, or maybe just being plain illogical and stupid, or just the drain of having to talk again and again and again and again and again and again and again nonstop for several hours is for weeks on or months or years on end. That kind of grinds on you, man. If you never worked in a call center, you do not know what the hell pain those poor employees are going through. Your BS gamification techniques are not going to take that fact away, right? You're not going to create little badges and points. And they even talk about this bullshit. It's not about badges and points. It's about creating choice, blah, 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 choices and expertise. And that was this BS concept from video games again. That doesn't work in the real world, because what you're doing is your job. You're not going to be able to recreate a video game from a guy answering the phone. Answering the phone is his job, right? There's a very close loop of choices you have to fall between that context, which is answering the phone, right? They're not going to go on some quest and have the choice of becoming what character and use what magic sword and all this bullshit you have in video games. That is not applicable into the job that they're doing. It's work, it's still work. All right, anyways, let's move on. Say, don't tell your employees that they'll have fun. Okay, I'm just repeating myself. The only people that should be gamifying should be the management. If there's any design done from upper management, make sure it's done from the actual job the employees are performing. Sales or that means that the BP wants the sales rep, and that's just in the case. It's centralized. Head management knows what team was best. So the best gamification concepts that I've seen were from managers that have no idea or no concept of the gamification theories or game design theories. They pretty much knew their employees and came up with some fun idea that they thought their employees, based on the interaction they had with their employees, had. And a lot of these gamification solutions are rather autistic in the sense that they don't really go on to understanding the social dynamics or in the individual traits that require you to have fun or like enjoy yourself, assuming in that context. And in the call center context, I'm not saying that I'm not contradicting myself, or I'm not saying that you're going to make the work fun, but what you do in a call center is that if you're doing your job, you're building up pressure because it's grinding, and you have this side activity you do on the side. So it's not while you're doing the work, it's a side activity aside from speaking to someone on the phone, where you might have this little stupid game. It might be, for example, if you're sales, you have a leaderboard, right? And if you make certain points, you can run like some dice and get some prize or something like that. So you have this side stuff that's outside your job performance, which kind of liberates pressure. So it's kind of like a pressure cooker where the employee's getting grinded, and you have that little bulb you release some of the pressure, where that's the game, right? So it's a different concept. It's not making the work game fun, but doing a side activity, which might be some dinner, joking around, etc. It doesn't have to be like a game per se, but you have to have some kind of release of the pressure of the employee. So that's basically what it is. So you have to have the people know what to do. So the gamification community is really autistic. So if you were to contrast the game design proponents they have, say for example, to comedy writing, right? If you were to apply that sort of framework where it's mechanical, they subdivide people with poor 4x4 personality types, and this type of people are gonna like jokes better, and this type of joke better than this other type of joke. So you need to know which personality types are in your audience, and then apply the specific jokes to it. It's very mechanical, very autistic, the whole concept of gamification, what they're doing, right? They're seeing people as these atoms where they recombine them and create certain molecules, right? So if there's this group of people are consistent of these atoms, which is personality type, you have this molecule. That's pretty much what they're doing, and they have these very mechanical applications to it. So therefore, I need to perform this mechanical application in order to get this result. This is not how social relations work. Just think about if the bullshit you're promoting in gamification were applied to comedy writing, which is not a way to have fun, would it make any sense? It doesn't, man. It's kind of like the flow. It's very contextual. It's very tacit in order to create like these sort of entertainments, right? And yeah, anyways, moving on. So pretty much, yeah, you have to have the people on the floor knowing their team, coming up with this stuff. If you get someone that doesn't understand the people, the actual employees on the floor, you probably shouldn't have them have a lot of authority over any of these engagement management techniques, right? So that doesn't mean to say they have no word on it. A lot of them might know what the hell they're doing, but you just use your judgment. So it's here. Don't give the manager game design theory. It is irrelevant for the reasons already mentioned. Instead, have them come up with what they believe should be fun and run some experiments, lean startup style. So the lean startup, pretty much, the gamification gurus hate it when I mention this. So pretty much these 2 points, that A is the management, the manager and the floor that has the best judgment of what makes something fun, not the bullshit theories that piss them off. And so it's not the gamification expert, right? Don't read their bullshit. You're the manager. What would you believe instinctively would make something fun? And the lean startup. So the lean startup, if you haven't read it, it's a pretty popular book in business. I read it years ago. The basic gist of it is that the guy Eric Ries was a programmer. I believe was the main programmer for a video game company, where he was kind of involved in the whole design of the company too, because it's a startup, so there's not a lot of people, pretty much a few group of people trying to figure out how to make a game. And he pretty much came up with the concept, for example, the minimal viable product. So instead of working hard to create something you believe would be wonderful and they would like, do a quick test. Make a minimal viable product, the very backbones of what you're doing, and run a test and see if you get some people interested in it. And he pretty much just goes insane. All these very simple stuff you could have done. To do it, he goes and saying that you have to study the interaction of people with a minimal viable product and see where they're going through it. And pretty much some stuff that you create that might be BS might actually be very popular. One example of this, for example, he claimed that he didn't have time or effort to create code where the character could open the door, the video game character, right, and step out into the major world from a room and make it seem natural, right? So like if the actual character was open the door and going to the other side of the room, they didn't have the ability to do this, and they just have the character kind of like fast travel around the world. So, okay, where do you want to go? The other side of the world? Okay, just select that in the fast travel. So the video, and he was kind of embarrassed of doing this because he's a coder and he understands the reason he couldn't do it the way he wanted is because he didn't have the time or effort to write the code for it. But once they tested it out with the players actually thought that this more simple design was superior, more advanced than their competition that actually had the whole process of opening the door and coming out, because they were fast traveling for some reason. So the players thought there was an improvement, so it was a better game overall. They would have never discovered this without a minimal viable product. So anyways, the basic gist of it is that the Lean Startup is a book about creating a video game that they develop some engagement technique, right? The whole point of the Lean Startup is how to get people interested in his video game engagement. The freaking word the gamification gurus talk endlessly about engagement, right? And they develop a process, kind of like the scientific process, pretty much abductive logic, where they were able to run some tests, figure out what people were interested in, and tweak their proposal in order to create engagement, right? So this is the ultimate freaking gamification book, if you really think about it. So I was pretty much just telling them, the people like asking me a question, for example, what should you be reading? Just read the Lean Startup, man. That's all you need. Is read the Lean Startup, get the principles, apply those principles and to whatever design you're doing. And yes, and that's how you figure out what people like, is not figuring out what like what personality type they have and filling the 4x4 boxes like some autistic dumbass and figure, well, I got a lot of achievers, gotta create some achiever stuff. Like, that doesn't work, man. You have to go beyond that bullshit. And yes, and apply the concept of Lean Startup. So they got pissed off. They never really attacked the arguments. Mainly they were saying, well, the Lean Startup is not sufficient. It doesn't go over this or that theory of video game design. Like, dude, it's a video game design. It's a video game company literally building a video game in order to attract engagement and attract pretty much players, and this was applicable into the rest of the world and the business world in general. And you tell me this is not a gamification for design, right? No, the whole concept they're doing is that they are only interested in crap that they have created and they have a patent on, intellectual property, AP, and they're able to charge money for either the consultancy techniques or their materials, right? If you were to tell them, hey man, it's actually this book made from someone else, that it's all you need, of course they're not going to like that. Their freaking business is going to go out of business. So they really hated this, and I still stand by this. The best book, it's probably the Lean Startup. The other one is A Moment of Clarity. Pretty similar, has some abductive logic. Probably Moment Clarity would be better book, but the Lean Startup is more popular. Anyways, just because something produces dopamine doesn't mean it's a credible management tool. Facebook creates dopamine and it disrupts most jobs. Food, drugs, pornography, etc. create dopamine. These aren't credible management techniques, neither are games per se. So the basic idea of dopamine, if you look at the 20 what was it? 2009, 10, 11, right? They had the basic concept where the dopamine triggers were kind of going to brainwash people into doing what they wanted to do. And they did change their story after that to make more like gamification, like this win-win thing where everyone's going to improve and be happy. So they had the whole happiness argument push afterwards. But you see the stuff they were saying like back in the 29, 10, 11, it's like the world's going to be divided between two peoples, where the people who control the systems and the people who are part of the system. So it's pretty much like you hear what the Chinese are doing with their censorship and their social score systems. They were promoting that stuff back in the day. And there's kind of like this video game designer, Jesse Shell, has a video called the Game Apocalypse. So he's not necessarily promoting this, but he kind of has this scenario where gamification is pretty much going to have these authoritarian, not authoritarian, but totalitarian, which is something that's controlling every aspect of your life. And have like social scores where if you take the bus, you're reducing your carbon footprint, so you gain some points, stuff like that. There was actually a TV series called The Black Mirror, which has one episode about the likes, which is, hey, dude, like that reminded me so much of the bullshit of gamification that they were talking back in the day. Again, they changed the rhetoric, so it's the rhetoric for marketing purposes probably, but they're pretty much saying, yeah, dude, you can either be the person that's designing this stuff and controlling the world, or the one that's being controlled by the other people. And it had to do with dopamine. So pretty much they were going to create dopamine triggers, and kind of like the dumbass rat. If you've ever seen the experiments that they do some implants where they can trigger dopamine, some rat, every time it pulls a lever, and the rat just pulls that lever again and again and again, triggering dopamine until it dies, right? So that's the basic idea of what they're looking to do, and that's the basic idea of what gamification would work. You're triggering dopamine. Dopamine creates addiction for certain behaviors you expect, you want them to do, and they're like this stupid rat pulling that lever trying to get that hit. So doesn't really work. And we went to why the games don't work, like the whole virtual reality, you cannot have godlike powers. But if you look at it, like, yeah, dude, like, given certain foods creates dopamine. Like, why don't you have, like, the candy vacation, where you give a candy every 50 minutes if you do a good job. If you put that candy in your mouth, you get the sweets, it's creating dopamine. Is that a good management technique? It creates literal dopamine. There's actually scientific evidence for that to create dopamine. While the gamification argument is pretty much is this deductive logic. Well, they rationalize if it's triggered in games and we still in the game, the secrets in games, it should be applied in outside games and gamification. You have no evidence for that. You're just making it up. This gamification does have evidence. Of course not, wouldn't work. Then you have drugs, pornography, which actually, if you read about Wall Street, there's actually a lot of pornography a lot of times in the bull markets. Create dopamine. So yeah, just because it creates dopamine, it doesn't mean it's a freaking secret management technique. And then again, I don't believe it's, well, dude, I bet you money it's not even getting close at what the dopamine triggers that are causing video games being played in gamification communities. Like, they're not replicating the same bullshit in a video game, in a video gamer's brain outside that that video game. They're just making it up. Just misapplied deductive logic, which I spoke in the other video. So, all right, this is taking a lot longer than I wanted. So let's try to speed this up, assuming anyone's going to see this. Probably not, but alright. Just because an employee do X in their spare time for entertainment, it doesn't mean that applying that to my management toolkit will improve performance. If I like to read fiction, doesn't mean I want to make a living writing or reading fiction. If I like to watch sports, doesn't mean I want to make a living watching sport, commentating, blah, blah, blah. So pretty much what I'm saying here is that correlation does not equal causation. Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of programmers that say they don't want to do video games because they love video games and they don't want to make that their work and start hating video games maybe. And at the same time, you got these other programmers who really like doing video games. And making video games is their video game, quote unquote. That's the game they're playing. So, I mean, correlation does not equal causation. But yes, because an employee does something in their spare time does not mean that they want to do that with their job. That's their hobby. It doesn't necessarily want to do it all the time. And there's also this this concept, I believe, who did it? I believe it was Buddha, the Buddhists. They originally said this. I might agree. Anyways, I'm freaking forget about which philosopher did it. But there's this whole concept was you do something pleasurable for a long time. Well, actually, economics talk about this too. There's a point of diminishing return. So yeah, let's forget about Buddha. Let's talk about your economics, since that's being more clear. Kind of thought about something I remember reading. Remember being in a history class years ago. Anyways, about Buddha, but and you can almost, there's a point of diminishing return. So say, for example, if you are on a sofa and then the sofa feels really good after a long day of work, you're in the sofa, oh damn, this feels really good. But what if you were glued or chained to the sofa? That sofa that felt really good when you first lay down on it for after a long day is going to start becoming a torture chamber, right? It's going to be very painful. And probably imagine being tied up to a chair for a few days, a week, months, years, right? That's going to be horrible. So the basic concept here is that just because someone does something on their spare time does not mean that they always want to do it either. For example, if you play video games or watch Netflix, right, for fun after a long day's work on the weekend for a few hours, doesn't mean you want to sit there and play video games, say 8 hours a day, right? Some people like doing that, but that majority of people are not interested in it. And the whole concept, like, hey, that's basically the main rationalization they do for gamification, that people are playing more video games than ever before. Therefore, if you make the world like a video game, that's what type of world they want to be in. Not really. No. Yes, because I like watching a TV show doesn't mean I want to be watching a TV show at a time, or I want my world to be like a TV show. It's an escape. It's a relief. Just because I like dessert doesn't mean I want to eat dessert all the time. That's the basic gist of it. I want my steak and potatoes, and I like dessert, but I don't want to eat it all the time. All right. Gamification industry is setting up the framework that employees are lazy, your job is boring, employees don't want to be there, and they'll be miserable. Well, that should be they're miserable. The gamification factor is here. The gamification factor is here essentially. Okay, this needs to be rewritten to make the job pleasurable. If it isn't pleasurable, you'll fail as a manager. This is essentially begging the employee to work for you by putting fluffy bunny films in your tummy. Please work. Aren't we fun enough for you? Game mechanics don't work with people who don't want to work, and maybe motivate and doesn't want to offer. Don't pay communication guru. Fire the employee if someone who wants to work instead. So basically, what this is saying here is the main cause of the gamification is that the employee doesn't like your job. They hate it, and your job as a management is to beg them for their job. Actually, I was reading a book on Herodotus, the Persian wars he wrote. This one quote, he's popping my head here, how he's saying that, because I like an old man complaining about the new times by an ancient book, but how degenerate the society had become, where the subordinates have to be lured through vanity into doing their duties. So pretty much saying, please do your job, instead of just being told what to do and doing it. So that's kind of what it is. So pretty much what you're doing for a management is that you're begging the guy to do his job. Please do your job. I'm trying to make it fun for you. We're not fun enough for you. Please do it. Dude, if you get employed, you have to do your job. That's your job. That's what you're getting paid for. You don't have to be led and begged to do your job. If someone doesn't want to do their job, you just fire the guy, right? Get someone else who does want to do the job. I mean, obviously, there's just some management thing that you can do, encouragement, and that's the last result. But it's just the whole concept. Like, you have to beg people to do what they're supposed to do because they're not engaged. God damn it, dude. Seriously, I just hate this. Sorry. Shut up. That was probably cuss. So pretty much, someone that doesn't want to do the job is fire them. And the idea of the game mechanics not working unless someone doesn't want to work. I got this from sales, where they do use like a lot of game mechanics, competitions, etc. The people who didn't really want to work, and these were usually gamers. So the whole concept of gamers are somehow different and they want to create a world that looks like the games is for the most part bullshit. Like, knocking doors, we went as a group to a different state, so you're living with these people in the same apartment. The people that brought their video game consoles because they're addicted to video games did not care about the promotions and game mechanics, etc. we had for sales. They were only interested in playing their particular video game, and these were the people that were the least interested in participating and working hard. Were the gamers. So if people do not want to freaking work hard, they're not going to be part of your incentive program. But the people that were really interested in working hard, like the sales rep was saying, yeah, this job, it might actually change my life by the amount of money I'm going to make. Those people were given an excuse to work hard. They work hard, and the excuse to work hard were these competitions. So if someone doesn't want to work, these competitions are not going to make them want to work. It still works. Someone who does want to work might work harder because of these competitions. It does kind of give them an excuse to work harder. And a lot of times in sales, for example, there is a financial reward attached to their performance, which is encouraging this, right? If there's no financial reward, it's probably not going to work the way you want it. I mean, the way to do it, the overall culture, for example, can change. But yeah, that's the basic gist of it. The whole point of gamification, putting fluffy feelings in their tummy. You know, are you happy now? We did these. We gave you these bullshit achievement points. You know, fuck yeah, man. And a lot of the problems with the gamification too is that I feel like what they're doing, or what they did, they were pitching to managers and telling them that through the gamification techniques that we're going to be able to get better performance through intrinsic motivation from their employees, and these management should stay away from extrinsic motivation, which is financial reward. So pretty much they were saying, stop paying these people more money, get my techniques, and we're going to make them work harder without paying them more money. But again, you got to pay the manager, the gamification guru, for those techniques. So I've been told the guy, and the guy they're like denying this, that's not their go-to. But then again, it's only if you accuse them, if you're talking to them, this is something they were kind of getting into, right? don't focus. They were drilling this. Do not do extrinsic motivations. Do intrinsic motivations. And of course, if you're a manager, oh, so I don't have to pay them more money. So there's a cost. So it's kind of clever what they did. So the excuse to pay the gamification guru was already created by the cost that management would save by these intrinsic motivators, which justified them paying the gamification guru in the first place. So this is a big, it's a scam, honestly. I don't say a big scam. It's just a little, like a little sales trick they did. All right, let's see. Where would I leave off? All right, and you will see below this. So 10. Study knowledge management and complexity in a game mechanic will apply must subversive to management theory and practice in the real world. Yeah, so pretty much the whole problem with gamification is that they're claiming that the game theory comes first, is more important than the real world management techniques, which they claim it fails, right? It goes back to the whole book, reality is broken, right? You're not making things fun, so we gotta put the game mechanics first. No, dude, like you have to work on the real world and the management techniques first. That goes first. What works in the real world already, and then you can do some tweaks for that. And that kind of goes back to the two types of design, which is greenfield design and brownfield design. So greenfield design is designing a completely new system. Brownfield design is designing over a system that already exists. And I've talked about this to certain gurus, gamification gurus. And it's like, dude, you're kind of missing the point here, because all your designs is greenfield, not brownfield. And their response, and I went over what the rationales for it. Their response was simply say, well, the people, the management are going to have more enjoyable time doing a greenfield design. That's not the goddamn point. The point is, if you are changing something in management, an already operating system, you're not starting something from scratch. You are coming in, there's already an operation in place, management techniques, a specific job that they're doing, and you're tweaking something that already exists. You're not making something from scratch. You're not making the game from scratch. They cannot even grasp these basic logical concepts, and they're just half-wits, man. They're just goddamn idiots. And yeah, so anyways, and there's also this book, I can't remember the goddamn name of the book, but it pretty much is how to be a guild leader or something like that. So pretty much it's some guy who spent a lot of time playing online, massively multiplayer online game, managing the whole system. And this is something I was really about to drill in, because pretty much is reread that book several times, get some information, like the basic premises from it, and try to contrast that to my experiences as a manager, etc., and write some pretty cool stuff behind that. So, but basically, it did contradict a lot of the bullshit from gamification. So the MMO leader said that in order to create engagement in the MMO community, he had to apply real business management techniques into the MMO. So it's not necessarily the MMO by itself, obviously you need a good design, but the MMO by itself is not driving the engagement, people staying there, coming back. It's the guild leader using management techniques used in business in order to drive engagement. And I would have to reread the book, and if I were to ever freaking go back and get all the quotes, but I remember buying it and it's like highlight. All right, this is some really good stuff. But again, why would a gamification guru want this? If the management techniques that are driving engagement inside the MMO are from business, and these business management things are really applied to business, why do you need a gamification guru, right? So, I mean, they wouldn't go into it. So if you can run to a Google search on Amazon if you're interested, guild leader, for book, and the book would come out. I can't remember the name of it. I'm going to bother looking into it. But it was a really, really interesting book when I read it, and I thought it could have some really cool stuff mixed with sports psychology, business management, etc. But again, I got out of this bullshit industry. And in design, you do, oh look, brownfield design. Techniques from decay and complexity allows you to understand the nature of systems you're in. And once you know where you are, you can now know where the management of the future emergence. We're developing a moment of clarity for this. Also, all right, so pretty much step 12 is he's going saying is talking about managing emergence. Dave Snowden from Cognitive Edge talks about that too. I'm not going to go into too many details on this. I already explained what brownfield design is. So pretty much you have your current reality. What are the possible future scenarios you can get? It's not a blank slate. You can't just have a blank slate. So what are you currently working with? Which is probably why too you need to have the managers directly in contact with the team, be the primary people, the main people, or the only people managing these sort of management techniques, because they know what the hell the job requirement is. They know their teams. So yeah, pretty much brownfield, managing for emergence. And yes, you just move to the next one. You can generate fun and engagement to a large degree by creating growth mindsets. These are done by finding someone interested in praising them for working hard. Fixed mindsets are created by praising intelligence or talent. These techniques applied to management and education make gamification personality types irrelevant. Oh, I forgot about this one. So I already mentioned Carol Dweck a few times, but if you see her videos, she was able to have a child, which is the main focus of her study, have fun or hate doing the puzzle based on the compliments she was giving that child. So the open mindset where people were saying, so she generated the open mindset by telling the child, oh, you're such a hard worker. And the child wants to get more validation. So what does the child do? Now his identity, or her identity, is as a hard worker. So once they get more challenging puzzles, they want to prove themselves to be hard workers. And so they stay a longer time working on the puzzle. And were actually having a great time, smiling and giggling. Then you have the fixed mindset where they were telling, oh, you're so intelligent doing that puzzle. And the child now identified as being intelligent, and when they were not able to perform correctly with that puzzle, that challenged their identity as being intelligent, and they had a horrible time doing the puzzle. But the main point of this is, if it's not the game mechanics, it's not the personality type, the player personality type. Carol Dweck was able to control the kid having fun or not having fun by the way she complimented that kid, which again, she doesn't go in the background why they were interested, the identity, validation, etc., if I remember correctly, but that's what it is. So why the hell do we need these gamification gurus and all their bullshit theory on game design and mechanics and dopamine triggers when Carol Dweck is here? And she can create very quickly the experience of the kid having fun or hating the puzzles games they're playing, right? So pretty much if the management were to just apply Carol Dweck's techniques at praising, maybe that would just make work fun by itself and you don't need gamification. That's what I didn't really talk about this one of my time, but I remember reading the Carol Dweck stuff, like, and like thinking to myself, all right, dude, these gamification people are BS. You don't need this stuff. So the Lean Startup is about a video game company that developed a process of engagement to engage video game players. This process has been adopted around the world, multiple industries and governments. This means this process taken by game designers successfully applied to non-game context by millions. If you understand complex systems, you understand the need for self-to-fail experiments. Again, Dave Snowden talks a lot about this. The Moment Clarity book too. The Lean Startup is the best gamification book in existence. Probably the Moment Clarity would be too, but the Lean Startup is pretty famous. So pretty much I explained this before, the Lean Startup. Yeah, if you know the Lean Startup, it's a better toolkit for creating engagement. It comes from a video game. It's applicable to the rest of the world. The gamification gurus don't like this because they don't want to be replaced. They want you to pay money for their bullshit. Let's see, 15. You can't rely on best practice. You can't rely on best practice to operate in complex systems. The fact that the gamification industry is mainly a collection of best practices makes it, for the most part, irrelevant. So this kind of goes back to Dave Snowden too, specifically in my case. That's the first guy I came across talking about complex systems. So pretty much what best practice is, that you have one best way to doing stuff. Then you have the whole notion of good practice, where there's a little bit of wiggle room for doing stuff. For example, best practice might be something in working in a factory. There's specifically a best way to do it. Good practice might be someone in customer service, which they have to adapt within a framework, within a context, the best way of doing something. And then complex systems, if you read A Moment of Clarity, for example, talks about abductive logic. The Lean Startup talks about complex systems. You don't know exactly what the best way to doing stuff, so you run some tests and figure it out, and you get usually results you were not expecting. So yeah, so pretty much the gamification is filled with best practices, case studies. They don't know what the hell they're talking about. They don't know how to operate in a complex system, and they should probably be out of business. So 16. Saying you're a gamification expert doesn't give you credibility as a consultant on every topic under the sun. You need real-world experience to justify your consultants. Your studying video game theory is irrelevant since it isn't applicable to design in the real world. Saying you're a gamification expert is a trick to turn yourself into a universal consultant where you lie about being able to gamify everything and therefore funify everything. Everything's fun, with the promise of increasing productivity of employees. So that's pretty self-explanatory. Kind of went over it. So would you hire someone as a VP of sales if he has no experience in sales, but he has created pop psychology books and played video games? Right? You probably wouldn't do it. Begs the question, why would you let this guy design your whole system for sales if he has no experience in sales, right? So there's, yeah, so yeah, man, this, how long is this? Oh my god. All right. The closest thing to dopamine addiction and the engagement from it will come from the winner effect. If you understand that, you also know there's inconveniences. So for the inconveniences, just read the book The Hour Between Dog and Wolf, mainly. That's a business context, and pretty much what happens is that the guys become too overconfident. They start making mistakes and believe they have the golden touch. But at the same time, if they don't have the winner effect, they're just these emasculated eunuchs that can't do crap. So it kind of, yeah, they had there to be some kind of sobering effect where they're attached to reality. They just don't believe that whatever they do is just gonna win automatically. By the biological laws bestowed upon us in the real world, we can't necessarily make something fun from the start. Okay, this is a pretty big one too. As a game designer, Ralph Coster is playing, we need problem-solving neurological connections aimed specifically for a certain activity and to be fun when practiced. If these tacit skills aren't in place, the activity won't be fun at the start. Eventually, through deliberate practice, the activity may become fun. It is the activity that becomes intrinsically pleasurable due to the neurological developments of tacit skill. Then there's no need to gamify the real world or job, the activity is already pleasurable. So, all right, so this is kind of a hard one to explain. So, there's this article by Ralph Koster that's called A Theory. Oh, no, the other has this book. The article is called What Makes a Certain Game Fun, or something specific like that. I've written about it in other places. So, pretty much you say that what makes a specific game fun is that there has to be some kind of neurological networks you have in your brain that are designed to solve a certain type of problem. So maybe some people have strategic skills, so they like strategy games. Some people have fast reflexes, so they like first-person shooters. There's some kind of rewired in the brain that does this. So it's kind of like a person who runs a lot and they're in shape. They run because it's enjoyable. But if a person does not run at all and they're not in shape, running is going to be very painful. That's kind of what's happening, but with the brain for certain types of games, is what Ralph Koster is saying. And games are kind of like jogging is to a runner. It's just pleasurable. Practicing these specific skill sets. And if you do not have these skill sets, in order to develop them, it's going to be rather painful. And you have to go through a pain period. And once you get the neurological connection to solve that specific problem, then it's going to become pleasurable. So it's not inherently that the game is fun or not, which is what the gamification people are saying, but you have to develop this certain neurological process through deliberate practice in order to even start having that specific type of activity to be fun. And you can see that, for example, people that never played video games, like maybe older people, you sit them down playing some of the modern video games, they hate it, right? They hate it. But people who have played them and spend some time learning it, once they get the gist of it, they really enjoy it. So this goes back to the whole point. If it's based on these neurological connections, do we even need gamification? Gamification is not going to make things that are boring fun, because it's about developing these neurological connections, not about personality types wanting to achieve or kill or explore, right? The bullshit they push is these neurological connections. And the way you develop these neurological connections is through deliberate practice. And there's a whole community of sports psychologists developing a process on how to develop these skills. And the whole point is like, yeah, if you were to apply the skill-based gamification concept of developing these skill sets, which is what you want to do in business, you want to build skill sets, you're probably going to enjoy your job, yes, because you have developed these skill sets. So I'm not sure if it makes complete sense, but that's the basic gist of why skill-based gamification would be superior to regular nonsense gamification. There's no secret talent in video games are waiting for it to be exploited by making it work like a video game. If video game players haven't been deliberately practicing to play games, if flow and deliberate practice aren't compatible. Okay, so this is a pretty big one. So pretty much what it's saying, that the flow is a concept that you're doing something and it feels really fun, and deliberate practice is I mentioned before, like you're pushing yourself and doing repetitive. So flow is pretty much just playing the game, or the jugger running and having some fun. So the creative deliberate practice, Erickson pretty much says flow and deliberate practice are not the same. They're like opposites. Flow can happen as a result of deliberate practicing once you develop a skill set, but if you're in flow, you're not deliberately practicing. You're not increasing your skill sets. So the whole point of video games is that they're creating a sense of flow, right? So this is why the gamification gurus obsessed with it. Oh, we're creating a sense of flow. But at the same time, like the book A Reality is Broken, they claim that the video game players are in a state of flow and deliberately practicing at the same time. They're not. These are not compatible. You have to be deliberate practicing or doing flow. You can't be doing both. And this actually goes back to point 18, how you have to deliberate practice and then have fun doing something. But yeah, so pretty much this is proof, right? Gamification is bullshit. That one quote from Erickson, which I do believe a quote below in the book. Yeah, the gamification gurus don't know what the hell they're doing. They're using these incompatible concepts and claiming gamification. Video game players are doing both. So, and video games are about generating constant state of flow. Then their time playing games is mostly a waste of time because they're not developing a skill set. That's what I mean by a waste of time. Also, deliberately practicing a game doesn't give you a magical skill in other areas, since most skills consist of developing domain-specific memory that will be remembered. That will be able to remember an incredible amount of data from the chessboard. But this enhanced memory isn't a skill available outside chess. So pretty much what it is, like a lot of skill sets in chess depend on domain specific memory, on past patterns of behavior, what to do in certain situations. So expertise in something depends a lot on memory, having gone through the experience again and again and again. If you have expertise in chess, for example, if you were able to memorize the chessboard pieces really good, as a grandmaster, this does not apply to general memory. Only for chess expertise. So to say that the video game players were playing video games for 10,000 hours and they're now these magical experts at games in general is bullshit. To a large degree, you're creating domain specific memories when you're playing games for the most part, and they're not applicable outside the world. So the whole point is you're going to get video game players and say they can do this wonderful stuff outside. Yeah, maybe, but probably not. All right, I'm getting sick of reading this, so I'm going to try to go over it. Most of gamification is the repackaging of old management concepts that have been discredited for decades. They've simply wrapped this game design terminology. These include reliance on personality types, quantity metrics, and the paper performance argument. So, dude, this is so... I forgot about this one. So the paper performance is pretty much this technique was mainly done in healthcare, I believe in England, where you have the healthcare industry, and they did what's called the paper performance. So they handle these tasks that they make explicit. So when you do these tasks, say a certain amount of times or whatever, we're going to start giving you these bonuses, which is kind of like the point systems they use in gamification. If you do these tasks, you're going to get more points, or they quantify the behavior they're doing and given the financial reward, and which is what gamification is doing to a large extent. And what happens is that the whole system of healthcare started working horribly in the UK and parts of, I believe, Canada and the US implemented some parts, because you stop having people really care about the patients, but they were more interested in getting those financial rewards by doing certain tasks again and again. So pretty much they're trying to game the system. So the intrinsic motivation to help people was gone, and they were just trying to get those points or that money. Which, if you read the case studies of this, is very it's nearly identical to what gamification is doing. Only gamification just wants to do intrinsic bullshit, badges and points instead of money. But it goes to the point, it's the whole gamification concept is bullshit. It's been tried before. And related to that, advertising games, it's kind of like gamification is a repackaging advert games. Pretty much what advert games are is, as they said in marketing, well, people hate advertisement, but they love video games, so let's make video games and as a form of advertisement. So pretty much you have people play a game created by X company, say Coca-Cola, whatever, and the whole game revolves around Coca-Cola, and they're being exposed to Coca-Cola, but they're having fun at the same time because they're playing the game. So gamification is really advert games applied on the mass scale. Like they read it in marketing and they're planning other stuff. Pretty much people hate doing something, so let's have a game and make them do it and try to influence the way we want to. That's been tried before. And advert games, for some, there's a few exceptions that were successful, not for very long, but they were success stories. Like it's advertisement, right? You're not gonna have one advertisement last for a long time. So, but kind of goes to the point. Gamification claims it can run almost indefinitely, or they leave that part out. That's not going to last very long. But yeah, dude, it's pretty much advert games, dude. That whole concept of gamification has been trying before. And if you tell this to the gamification gurus, they'll deny it. Oh, you know very well gamification is something else. It is precious, and we're trying to make the world a better place. So pretty much they're not talking about the mechanics at advert games. They're saying the same concept, like someone hates doing something, so they're going to use a game to make them want to do it and trick them to having pleasure. That's the basic gist of it. They don't talk about that. But they talk about the noble mission of gamification, which is different than advertisement games. So that's what makes it different. But no, if it's the same goddamn process, the same goal of making people want to do something that they normally don't want to do for the benefit of government and corporation, that's basically what it is. Then, yeah, you are literally copy advert game. So I'm rambling already. I'll get some more wine here. But video game addicts have disruptive rewards center with a depleted number of dopamine and testosterone receptors. This means that the real world doesn't stimulate them properly. They rely on time-based games in the virtual world to for the constant artificial power-ups. This means that they can't engage properly in the real world. If they're bored, it's not because their brains are too complicated. It's because for morning jobs, because their reward centers aren't being stimulated properly. Let's see. They're the least likely to engage in gamification. Again, that goes on to my example of gamers and my door-to-door sales. Non-gamers are more likely to enjoy gamification design. Again, my experience for door-to-door sales. So this goes on to some studies that were done. If you Google video games and pornography and the decline of masculinity, there's several articles talking about this, like major news online news pages talking about this. I think it came in 2015. So pretty much what it is here is that they're claiming that it's kind of related to the winner effect. So the winner effect is really triggering masculinity, what you call the alpha male, by having dopamine and testosterone receptors in the brain. Video game and pornography is overstimulating these reward centers, so the brain tries to get homeostasis, have balance. So the brain starts reducing the amount of neurons, of receptors and the reward centers in the brain for dopamine and testosterone. So pretty much you're having a massive loser effect by playing these games and watching porn for a long time. So the studies were saying this is causing masculinity crisis, where men can't even have an erection anymore unless they're looking at some pornographic images or videos. They can't engage with real women, and the video game players don't find the real world stimulating, right? Because they have so few dopamine receptors in their brain that they just find the real world boring. So the gamification guru, what they've done is they twisted this, and they claim that the reason we have an engagement crisis is because the brains are so superior based on playing video games, that they're so complex, the real world is just too boring. So we need to pay gamification gurus to add extra levels of complexity. Yeah, as if most employees need more complexity, especially some bullshit reward system for points or badges or whatever that mean nothing. And through this extra complexity, this is going to be more stimulated for the players, and therefore for the employees, and therefore they're going to engage more, which is not the case. It has to do with over excessive video game consumption that's making their brains be depleted of these receptors. So the whole premise, the ontological reality of gamification that they're based on, they justify their payments, is bullshit. Some gamification techniques were founded on the belief that left brain people are extrinsically motivated and right brain people are intrinsically motivated people. I remember about this one. This is absolutely nonsense, and they've now claimed that this is just a metaphor. This is most likely false, and their models are based on the inaccurate understanding of the brain, and they're trying to save face. So it's actually caused a pretty big fight with some of the Caucasian girls, where they actually had their 4x4 like boxes, and then they had these left brain, right brain scenarios. So right brain people are going to be more interested in this type of game. Left brain people are being more interested in this type of game. And dude, they were serious about this stuff. And if you go businesses, like business articles, people still believe this bullshit left brain, right brain. So what I did, I quoted some somewhat obscure book of these cognitive psychologists. I don't know. Well, I don't know. I'm sure that's exactly what they were. I can't remember what they do, but they were opening up brains, so they had something to do with cognition. I do believe they were cognitive psychologists. So pretty much they had a whole book, top brain, bottom brain, for example. Can't remember the guy's name. It's saying that the left brain, right brain dichotomy was bullshit. And I quoted the guys, like, hey, dude, you guys gotta stop doing this left brain, right brain. It's nonsense. It just doesn't work. And they just erupted. They were so pissed off at this, and they actually started quoting, like, you can tell they actually read the articles I was saying, and they actually started quoting the well, not quoted, by mentioning the authors by name. I'm aware of the research done by these people. I know you're not. You fucking always say that shit, but you're not aware of it. By saying that this is just a metaphor. It had nothing to do. But it was somehow linked to all the non-metaphors of personality types in 4x4 squares. So basically what it is yeah, they have this whole premise of left brain, right brain, which has been years doing. I posted a book on how this is just nonsense, and all of a sudden, oh, it's just a metaphor. It's not taken seriously. I'm not seriously saying that there's left brain, right brain people. I know it's all BS. And if you look at the older stuff, no, they didn't, dude. They just went back, edited it, claimed it was a metaphor in order to save its face, so they can still sell their bullshit. I still have these snapshots, or for example, they would claim that their techniques are not based in science, but just because they're not based in science, it doesn't mean that they're right. To which I would answer, well, if you're claiming that you're causing all these dopamine triggers, for example, you probably should have some scientific basis for it. And if you read the books or articles they posted later on, after all the like public online discussions, they found some, they claim they found some scientific evidence for the bullshit. So you had actually people agreeing with me, dude, why you're saying this is causing dopamine triggers, and then you're saying you have no basis for science. Like, that doesn't make any sense. You have people agree with me on that, and then they moved on and they changed their pitch, and now their techniques that were a few months before not based in science were now based in science. So they went back, retracted, and found some justifications for the crap they never were based in science originally. Anyways, I'm rambling here. Don't be obsessed with intrinsic motivations are good or intrinsic or bad. Gamification community claims that it's going to create an intrinsic motivation to play games into the workforce. Lies. They take ideas from the books called Drive. Books that were simplistic, irrelevant for management. They claim money destroys intrinsic motivation. You create the real benefits of your employees' engagement, play a game. I'm already rambling, man. Money is a great real world benefit for your employees and engagement. Play your game. Money is a great real world reason for work hard. Most life problems are related to money. You can make my sales reps works like demons without commission. So basically what point number three is making is that they reference a lot the book Drive. And the book Drive is, I never read the whole book, but I read parts of it. I remember I own it. I've flipped through some of the chapters. There's just this one case study. And I mean, again, this is one of the hardcore books. The pop psychology bullshit they use for their management techniques. So there's one case study where they use it to justify why extrinsic rewards are bad. Where I remember, I think it had something to do with a candle, but some kind of puzzle. So pretty much they had two groups of people. One group of people were told that they have to solve a puzzle, and they were not paid for it. Another group of people were paid $20 for it. So the group of people that were paid $20, when they were told that time is up and they were not able to solve the puzzle, pretty much just stood up and left. The people who were not paid the $20 stayed a little longer trying to solve the puzzle after they told the time was up. So based on this, they concluded that extrinsic rewards are very bad for business, which is a complete nonsense, man. Like, you got the the whole conquest of the Spaniard conquistadors was based on gold, the American gold rush, the Mongolian hordes crossing the rest of the world. Yeah, even the Roman expansion to Gaul. If you see like a lot of the archaeological discoveries, apparently Gaul was a lot more sophisticated than what Julius Caesar wrote in his commentaries, and they were pretty much sacking the whole place for a lot of precious metals. So the problem with this, it's kind of like taking a fish and put it in a fishbowl and studying that fish in the fishbowl. You can see some observations, but it's not the fish acting in the real world. And especially as primates, for example, primates in zoos versus primates in the wild, we learn a lot of stuff about observing primates in the wild that we would never know by observing primates in the zoo. So just because this happened in this context environment, it doesn't mean it's happening outside in the real world, right? Correlation does not equal causation. And I believe it has to do a lot, for example, when you go to a buffet. So if you pay for all you can eat, you try to eat as much as possible in order to game the system. Again, the same thing with the payment. You're trying to game the system by getting $20 in, say, half an hour. So you're paid $40 an hour. So instead of staying there for a couple more hours, and you are paid less for an hour. So pretty much the whole point is like it doesn't correlate, man. If you're a sales rep and you do not pay you don't have a financial reward for the sales reps, you're not going to make them work hard at all. So you have to have some kind of financial reward in the real world. Wall Street, the same. We've got people working 80 hours a week sometimes. The pay is pretty damn well. That has a lot to do with them working so damn hard. But I mean, not entirely, but yeah, it's you can't just say don't give them money and they're not going to work hard. Yeah, if they are getting paid well, and if they slack off and they might lose their good paying job, that's a very good damn motivator to stay working hard. If they know they work hard and they get bonuses or commission or what have you, that's a really damn good motivator for them to work hard, right? And dude, I know sales reps that they go on Sundays in their days off and get in the call center and try to make some money, and they're excited that they made, say, $100-$200 in a couple hours. And yeah, dude, you cannot say money doesn't motivate people. It's they're like in this little bubble where they read their popsicle book. They think it's like some freaking fact. They have no damn gray matter in their head to figure out. And I know I say critically. Studies of winner effects show that making money creates an epigenetic changes. This is the same changes caused by playing player versus player video games and skill-based games in the real world. Money also rises status and helps their employees achieve their dreams. So obsessing over intrinsic rewards has led to a series of meaningless rewards and gamification inside. So this is basically connected to the book, The Hour Between Dog and Wolf, or they actually show if you make money, have the same triggers of the winner effect you get from winning, getting a new mate. So money does trigger the winner effect. And again, most problems in the real world are money. So people are working because they want money in order to solve their personal problems. So it's not just that money by itself, but the money has a cost. There's a cost you're trying to get the money for, getting their kids to college, whatever. Let's see. The Book of Moment of Clarity offers everything you'll need to know about gamification and the strategic level. Not sure what I mean by this little sentence. Read the Lego chapter. With the Lego chapter, pretty much they have like this anthropologist go study children, and Lego figure out a way how to make money by studying these children. Like the motivation, like what's happened is that the kids were playing more video games instead of playing Legos, and they tweak not the product itself, but the kind of the community around Legos in order to stay in business. Really interesting. The lean startup, I already talked about that. Recommend studying knowledge management, I already talked about that. You can't just say play as an evolutionary tool for learning, therefore any game you must make as learning as too. Games are limited and they can teach Mostly they rely on important tacit knowledge. I don't really want to explain this tacit explicit knowledge right now. I've talked about it elsewhere. It's a great for students, for new employees with no experience in the field. A sales rep may role play with a trainer. A logistics student plays MIT beer game to understand the bullwhip effect and supply chain management. A financial student gets a stock simulator, etc. This training is never sufficient. The player needs experience in the real world. After having experience in the real world, explicit knowledge will propel the individual rewards. The new argument the consultant is that the gamification training is about infinite games. This is a marketing trick to generate recruiting revenue. It doesn't have any real world benefit. So this kind of goes back to the idea of developing skills like in chess. Or using like simulations. So pretty much games are really good when you're a kid. You have no real world experience and you have like some safe to fail environment where you learn tacit knowledge. For example, communication skills, you know, how to walk and coordinate your body, etc. But it doesn't really work beyond that, and it's very limited. For example, you have some basic tacit understanding of something, you're probably better off, for example, especially as adults, engaging in explicit knowledge. For example, if you're a sales rep, you already know the basics of how to sell. You're probably better off reading some books of Grant Cardone than role playing with your buddy and your, so yeah. So I'm not going to go too specific on the tacit knowledge, explicit knowledge. I'm talking about that elsewhere. You should study the apprenticeship model and apply management instead of looking at games for training tools. 2 books I recommend: A New Culture of Learning by John Shigley Brown and Mastery by Robert Greene. So apprenticeship is pretty much you get someone that already knows how to do the job and you're a newbie and you follow him and learn the tools by imitating him and following his instructions, right? So this is a great way of learning tacit knowledge. A lot of the cathedrals, architectural masterpieces of Europe were made without a lot of books written about it. So pretty much the whole European model that constructed these masterpieces were based on the apprenticeship model, like ancient Greece too, stuff like that. So yeah, you can read the books he's mentioned for a better understanding of that. And last one, drum roll. Gamification literature is too oversimplistic. Amen. And without any deep understanding, remember the chapter 1 where the girl knows Daddy's a doctor. All right, so this is a reference to the book Intuition Palms from Daniel Dennett. That's how you say it. So he's a contemporary. What is he a philosopher, or does he talk about philosophy? He's kind of some kind of professor. He has some books on philosophy, cognitive psychology, religion. And the Daddy's a doctor pretty much reference one of his chapters where he talked about that the understanding that we have goes in layers. For example, a little girl might be right in saying that it's a doctor, but she doesn't really understand what the doctor is. It can be a PhD. What does the doctor do? How does he help people? Operations, giving pills, etc. So the understanding of what her father's profession is will grow as they grow older. But it's very also oversimplistic what gamification people, they claim to be experts, but if you look at the way they claim, like they like for education, they say, oh, games are for learning, so we're gonna have you learn through games. They don't really understand what the hell's going on in the brain, the evolutionary purposes of games. I mean, they kind of like it's for happening. Like games are not for happening, dude. There's this mammalian adaptation created in order to develop skills. So therefore, you need the skill-based games in order to become better adapted into the real world. That's what games come from. To make you a better predator in the jungle or avoid predators. So it's not about happiness. These people are these goddamn idiots. You can't simply say a sheep is like to a sheep. People learn in games. Games are fun. These are the oversimplistic slogans, but probably what they do for what they're planning to do when they do these. They try to do like these 3-day seminars, some very oversimplistic crap for management, where they can mainly grasps this stuff. And you got to realize the average IQ, the average IQ of the average person, the average the IQ of the average person, it's average, man. Like you cannot bombard these guys with some very useful information because they just won't grasp it. So they have to dumb it down and these stupid little slogans where the person feels like, if they're having an average IQ, feels like they're learning something that's applicable, but it's nonsense. And I mean, I don't want to sound like an asshole, but that's pretty much what happens to a lot of these popular pops business books. It's just some oversimplistic nonsense where the dummies of the world can feel like they're achieving something, but if you actually read it, it's nonsense. There's no substance there. So a lot of gamification is pretty much that. Yeah, so and a lot of the gurus are not even that smart to begin with. So I mean, probably they feel like they're doing the best they can and to the best of their understanding. And you got another group of people that cannot process a lot of information. Like they're not talking cognitively. There's only so much they can grasp, and the best work that is mediocre of this guru is available to them, and they believe it's brilliant. So I believe a lot of it is that happening. Once you start using specific terminology such as greenfield versus brownfield design, time-based versus skill-based games, explicit versus tacit knowledge, analogy versus fixed identity. All right, that analogy versus fixed identity, I think this has a lot to do with the Richard Barker criticism of gamification. He was saying that the personality types are on an analogy. They're not a literal personality type, which the gamification gurus claim they are. Even though they'll say, oh, I am using the Bartlett way and using it as an analysis, it's not a fixed personality type. If you point that out, that Richard Bartlett said it's not a personality type, but then they turn around and start using the exact way Bartlett said they're misusing it. Anyways, in player types of, okay, yeah, from Bartlett, their whole consultancy claims revealed to have no merit. So, that's the basic gist of it. So this took about 2 hours to relate. Or like I said, not sure if anyone's going to ever listen to this, but that's the basic maxims. That's I'm reading this actually. It's kind of convoluted too. Still, there's a few grammar errors, and I don't know. You can probably tell it's just some flow of consciousness I had. And yeah, I mean, I think it's better than any of the bullshit gamification gurus have done. But like a lot of the principles in here, if you were applied, it would be a lot more beneficial. Well, I mean, was more beneficial than some harmful bullshit and was anything, right? But this one actually has a level of coherence, right? It's based on the real world. But yeah, I'm just gonna leave it at that because I want to do something else. Bye.